At the Digicel Foundation, we work together with our local community to create a world where no one gets left behind. To date, we've invested approximately $40 million to impact lives in a meaningful way. Through our special needs portfolio, we've been able to raise awareness for those living with multiple disabilities. We've helped to change stigmas through our awareness-raising campaigns, give access to education for children with special needs through our 10 special needs centers, raise almost $500,000 through our Digicel 5K run for special needs to support special needs organizations. The Digicel Foundation is there for our communities in Jamaica, helping to create a world where no one gets left behind.
Welcome to Digicel Foundation's first virtual conference on special needs. Today, we'll be exploring some of the most pressing issues impacting persons with disabilities under the theme Overcoming Challenges to Workplace Inclusion. Thank you for joining us across Digicel Jamaica and the Digicel Foundation's Facebook and Instagram pages at Digicel Jamaica and at Digicel FDNJA. I'm your host, Dr. Terry Carell-Reed. We have an esteemed panel of experts with us today representing and advocating for the special needs sector, and I cannot wait to hear their insights. But before we jump into the panel discussion, allow me to share a personal experience or story. My grandmother, aka Jeannie Baby, will be 90 years old on November the 11th, 2021. And over the years, she's moved from using a cane to using a walker, and now she's in a wheelchair. And you would think that to go to doctor's appointments, lunches, brunches, breakfast, or just simple outdoor gatherings, it should be simple, right? And yet we have to call in advance to always ask if there is wheelchair accessibility. And even when they say yes, when you get there, you realize that wheelchair accessibility only truly includes the parking space that has the handicap sign. But when you actually get there, and my mom and I help her out of the car, the question now becomes, where's the ramp? Where are the rails? The width of the corridors, the width of doors, they're non-existent. Sometimes the actual distance from the parking space to the actual desired location makes it absolutely impossible. The funny thing about it is that we've only been inconvenienced in the past maybe 10 years, 15 years. But my question to you is, what about persons who are born with these needs, special needs, and having to deal with this level of lack of accessibility for their entire lives? Parents of children living with disabilities, how do they manage? So as we open up the conversation, I just wanted to set the tone to explain to you that it's a big, big picture, and we want to look at it from infrastructure, from design, and even to workplace inclusion. Ask yourself, when was the last time you lost a job opportunity or a promotion to someone living with a disability? I'll allow you to sit and to think about that. But in the meantime, let us meet the panelists. Senator Dr. Floyd Morris, he is a celebrity, by the way. Born in Bailey'sville, St. Mary, where my best friend is from, Senator Dr. Floyd Morris developed glaucoma in 1983, and this unfortunate illness led to his blindness in 1989. Deciding to take control of his life, he got assistance from the Jamaica Society for the Blind to learn Braille and restart his education. A scholar and lecturer at the University of the West Indies, Mona, he was also the first blind person to be appointed to the Senate. As an advocate for persons with disabilities, he was recently elected to serve a 4-year term on the United Nations Committee on the Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Welcome, Senator Morris. Now, Dr. Christine Hendricks is known for her distinguished work to facilitate effective, inclusive practices and service for individuals with disabilities. Her service in this area spans more than 2 decades. She's a member of the community of persons with disabilities and has lent her considerable expertise and experience to providing national and international leadership on policy and issues affecting individuals with disabilities. She serves in an advisory capacity on the several national boards, committees, and national projects, including the Task Force on Disability Subsector Plan and the Task Force on Social and Vulnerable Groups, both part of Jamaica's Vision 2030. She currently serves as the Executive Director of the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities. Welcome, Dr. Hendricks.
Thank you for having me.
Kimberly Sherlock Marriott Blake is an international development professional with a passion for nation building that is effective, efficient, and data-driven. She has been a self-proclaimed tech tinker since childhood, who now, as Executive Director of the Jamaica Association for the Deaf, believes in the power of technology to improve organization capacity for project management, strategic planning, and multi-sectoral development. Welcome, Mrs. Marriott Blake. Marilyn Mccoy is the Executive Director of the Jamaican Association on Intellectual Disabilities, or JAID, with the responsibility for steering the organization and managing its operations. Marilyn is an advocate with over 36 years of experience supporting people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Her nonprofit career started in 2001 after 16 years as an educator. Welcome, Ms. Mccoy. Great to have you. Charmaine Daniels is a dedicated professional with a total of 21 years experience in the digital communications industry, including 13 years with Digicel Jamaica. Since joining the Digicel Foundation Board of Directors 4 years ago, Charmaine has worked towards the goals of building a more inclusive, enterprising, and caring society, helping to create a world where no one gets left behind. Welcome, Ms. Daniels. And before we jump into our panel discussion, we have a very special guest. Joining us all the way from Washington, D.C. is Crosby Cromwell. And Crosby is the Chief Partnerships Officer for the Valuable 500, the global movement putting disability on the business leadership agenda. Crosby is charged with developing and supporting the Valuable 500 companies and the organization's partners committed to advancing disability inclusion. Welcome, Crosby. Great to have you.
Thank you so much. I am beyond thrilled to be here with you today. What an amazing panel that you have in the room. I can't wait to listen and learn. I want to tell you a little bit about the Valuable 500 and Digicel's role in that. We're so proud that you all are a part of what we're doing on a global level. So we're going to talk about it. But first, I want to begin with an audio description. So my name is Crosby Cromwell. I have long red hair. I'm wearing a striped sweater today, and I have skin that will sadly always, always burn in the sun. So coming to have this conversation with you, who is the Valuable 500? We're a global disability movement led by CEOs. We were founded by Caroline Casey in 2019. Caroline herself is a person with a disability, with vision disability. I myself identify as a person with a disability to some of the statistics that were already brought up on the call, which are so important. 80% of individuals with disabilities actually have invisible disabilities. So as you think about that today, think about that stat as we move through our conversation. But again, we were launched in 2019 at Davos in conjunction with seed funding from Richard Branson and the then CEO of Unilever, Paul Pullman, with the idea that disability had moved too slow for too long because leadership, the highest levels of leadership, had not been at the helm of this conversation. So it really is a movement of 500 CEOs bringing their 500 companies together. Digicel and every individual company within the collective have a commitment statement that you are advancing, things that you are working on, both from your foundation perspective as well as your employee base. We are here to be a resource and a guide. We're having this conversation with 500 companies that represent over 20 million employees and $8 trillion in revenue annually, based in 41 countries. So you are a part of a vast movement, and we truly see this as a tipping point. I've been working in this space for 20 years, both on the nonprofit and the corporate side, and have not seen the conversation take place like it is now. It may be Pollyanna, it may be hopeful, but there really is movement around business stepping to the plate or coming to the table to understand how the disability value chain across the business can have an impact. That's everything from C-suite and where the conversation is taking place at a leadership level, to culture and what you can do from a workplace and a workforce perspective, to the point of needing ramps. What do your physical buildings look like? What do your policies and practices look like? To how does Digicel serve your customers, whether B2B or B2C? Reporting, what are you looking at from your internal data and how are you putting that out into the world? And representation, What does disability look like? Are you putting it into your marketing campaigns? How does it sound? Are you putting it into your executive talking points or things that you're putting out into the world? Very much like this event that you're having today. So we are here always as a resource. You are, again, a part of a truly historic global collective that over the course of the next 3 years, we will watch what you do together. We will watch what you do individually, and then we're going to put that news out to the world to truly, hopefully, show for the first time the profitability that lives inside disability. So I'll stop there. I wish again that I were with you and look forward to the rest of the conversation. Thank you for what you do every day. Thank you for being a part of the valuable 500. Again, I wish I were there in person to be with you.
Thank you so very much, Crosby. Just listening to you, I mean, even your welcome and how you described yourself, it really does show you that the language has to be inclusive as well, not just the policies and the programs, but just how we think, and always thinking about persons who might be listening but who may be visually impaired. So thank you for that. Profitability that lies within disability. You certainly dropped a lot of nuggets, and we're so happy to have that international perspective on the need for workplace inclusion for persons with disabilities. Now, before we jump into our discussion, let's hear a bit from our panelists. Speaking on legislation for a more inclusive work environment, let's hear from Senator Floyd Morris.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and it's my absolute pleasure to be a part of this distinguished panel, and also to hear Cosby articulating her views from her organization, and just to say thank you for describing your beautiful self. You know, I'm really happy at the role Digicel is playing in terms of sensitizing the populace as it relates to issues relating to persons with disabilities. And we are all about pushing for participation, inclusion, and non-discrimination against persons with disabilities. And if you're talking about participation, inclusion, and non-discrimination, legislation must be at the core of the conversation. Because gone are the days when you are going to expect individuals to operate on the basis of goodwill. When it comes on to persons with disabilities, we tried that with the standard rules in the early 1990s, and it never worked. And so the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities has ushered in a sort of rights-based era where legislative action is at the core of the Human Rights Trust and the Development Trust for the inclusion and participation and non-discrimination of persons with disabilities. And so, you know, countries across the world are moving towards the implementation of legislation. And right here in Jamaica, we have passed the legislation from 2014. We are moving to the point of implementation now. The minister set the effective date for the 14th of February 2022. Great. The regulations have been tabled in Parliament and to be finalized in the Senate. We have the codes of practice are ready to go. And so I'm looking forward to a new epoch as it relates to persons with disabilities in terms of legislation driving the development for us in this country.
All right, full speed ahead. Thank you so very much, Senator Morris. Absolutely, legislation is at the core of everything that we will be doing going forward. Speaking on building access to workplaces through physical and infrastructural improvement, here is Dr. Christine Hendricks.
Thank you so very much. And so from this perspective, we start with the policy of Vision 2030, where Jamaica is seen as an inclusive space, a space that is accessible for all, and a space that everybody has a responsibility in nation building. And that's the vision in Vision 2030 for persons with disabilities. And so as we move forward, we look to as well the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities that speaks to a concept called universal design. And universal design is the creation of any product or any environment that will suit anybody at any point in time during their stage of life. And if it is that we think universal design, then the environment will be easier to design so that everybody can fit in, including persons with disabilities. So if as employers or if as builders and constructors we begin from the parking lot, as you spoke earlier, we can think of the parking space. Now what I notice is that the parking space for persons with disabilities, yes, it has the international accessibility sign. However, it is the same size as a regular parking space. Now, the accessibility parking space must be a parking space and a half, if I may put it like that. And so it will give the person who's using the wheelchair and the support enough space to maneuver and to move around, then to get on the ramp that should not be a slope, and allow the individual independence, if possible, to get inside the building with ramps and rails, and without a step at the door to step up, and with wide enough doorways to go through. When you get in, the countertops are not too high that you're staring up at them. But even if they are high, there are also aspects of that same countertop that is so universally designed that you have high and low.
Absolutely.
So it supports both the tall individual as well as the person who wants to sit in a chair, or the person who cannot stand for long, or the person in a wheelchair, or the person who is short of stature. When we go to the bathroom, all right, so we get inside the building and we are at the counter, but we would like to use the restroom. How does the door push, in or out? When you get in, are there rails, grab rails? Can you maneuver in the space? Is the basin at a height
Dr. Hendricks,
where...
we don't want to give them too much, we don't want to give them too much, in the opening remarks, we want to make them wait a little bit for the question that I have for you, but I'll allow you to continue.
Right, so the facilities within and without should be accessible for persons with disabilities. And so we just ask you to think universal design, not necessarily designing it for persons with disabilities, but designing it so that everybody can utilize the space.
Such a beautiful point. Thank you so very much, Dr. Hendricks. When I visited Singapore, what the chief of design at Adobe said to me was that in Singapore, from designing infrastructure all the way down to software, they think about the weakest person in the society. They start at the weakest person and then they build up. Because if you can include the weakest person, then naturally the able-bodied person will benefit. Everyone basically benefits. So thank you in terms of telling us about the concept of universal design. So here to tell us a bit about assistive technology as a gateway to workplace inclusion is Kimberly Sherlock Marriott Blake.
It's very interesting how technology has just evolved over the last year. COVID has put technology in a position where it's no longer, if you have the money, it's because you have no choice. And I think it's really interesting how we have allowed the force, if you will, of having to adapt to technology to put us in a position where we're saying, wow, okay, so since we have to do this, we need to prep our staff, we need to prep our spaces, we need to update our equipment and so on. And I'm just like, finally, wow, finally. Because we see assistive technology as something that is far off, that is difficult to make sense of, that's hard to put in place. But assistive technology is really the device, a tool, a system that's there to make everything easier, to make things more accessible. If we break assistive technology down into maybe, let's look at 4 different areas. If we look at communication, Zoom, as much as we've kind of in the past, we said, no, the meeting must be physical and so on. Zoom has made things so much easier because an interpreter can be virtual now. No one needs to worry about whether or not they will be able to get an accessible bus to get to a location, to get to a meeting, because from the comfort of my home where I know I have that access, I am able to join into this meeting like anyone else. I have captions on that system. I'm able to pin an interpreter to be able to access it. And that's just communication. When we move now to a system, think about an HR system. We've heard so much about the HR Plus system that the government is putting in place. That makes it easier for me as an employee to be able to communicate with my superior, to express to them, I'm having a challenge with this. You see, I type into the system, I can update my documents. Yes, we still need to have engagement. I want to make it very clear. Assistive technology will not, cannot, and should not replace interaction, right? But it allows a system that's in place that will support, facilitate, email, WhatsApp. These are systems that are in place that can make access so much easier. And then if we move now to security, a light and sound alarm, security cameras, a two-way camera, monitors. All of this is assistive technology. But we don't see it as assistive technology until we get to the point where we're like, okay, since we have no choice and we have to put these in.
Yeah.
And then as you put them in, you realize it becomes so much easier for everybody. And I mean, if you want to make it really simple, a physical, an assistive technology device or tool, if you will, that supports the physical access is an elevator. But we don't see it as an assistive bit of technology there. We just see it as, some fancy infrastructural tool that we need to put in place. It's optional.
If you want to take
but
the stairs or maybe no.
or maybe you'll need, oh geez, you need a lift. Oh goodness, how will we figure this out?
Correct.
These are simple accessibility tools that we can implement that is to the benefit of everyone and helps to really put us in that place where we are an accessible workplace and an accessible Jamaica, and we're able to really take hold of our motto, out of many one people, which means everybody is included.
Thank you, and I can't wait to get into that when we do our deep dive. Now, breaking stigmas is an integral part of achieving workplace inclusivity for persons with special needs. Here to discuss the way forward for employees to create a more inclusive environment, or employers, is Marilyn Mccoy.
Thank you so much, and I am really happy to be here. I work with a group of persons known as the Disabilities, Intellectual Disability. And persons with intellectual disabilities will experience challenges. They have limitations in intellectual functioning as well as in adaptive behavior. Therefore, they will have challenges with learning, and they will have challenges with acquiring specific skills that will promote independence. Now, persons with intellectual disabilities has always experienced low levels of employment, and this has been a global trend. Now, in Jamaica, there are a number of barriers to employment for this group of people. And stigma is one of those, what I would call troublesome obstacle. Stigma is really just a belief or an attitude about someone utilizing a distinguishing factor, for example, disability. Usually where there's stigma, there is usually discrimination. And what we are saying here is that in the workplace, there are a number of barriers that have been associated with stigma. For example, stigma usually associates it or elicits responses like pity, anxiety, avoidance, hostility, bullying, withholding help, and even hatred and disgust. It can lead to discrimination. And discrimination really is the unjust deprivation of someone's rights and opportunities as a result of that particular stigma. It impacts the individual with intellectual disability as well as the family members. Absolutely. And their ability to provide support to the member with ID. Stigma lies, as I said, in the root of discrimination. Some of those include stereotypes and assumptions that persons with intellectual disability lack the ability to work and should be separated from the workforce. Harassment and abuses due to lack of understanding about their disability and their capabilities. Limited opportunities for persons to build relationships in the workplace, as well as unequal pay for work done. How do we break this stigma?
Oh, no. That's my question for later on. No, I'm going to ask you to stick up in right there, because that is going to be my absolute question, especially for those listening. They're going to want to know, how do we do it? But we want to remind you that stigmas they're dangerous, and they leave many people vulnerable and at risk, and the stigma is usually shown in language and attitude and just your thoughts, and just us having this conversation allows you to unlearn a lot of the things that we think are just, this is just a normal thing. No. It's not normal, it's not cultural, and there's some things that we have to leave behind. So we're going to get into that conversation when we do our deep dive. And finally, Last but certainly not least, we are joined by Charmaine Daniels, who is going to tell us a little about the impact social enterprises can have on creating jobs for persons with special needs at the community level.
Thank you for having me. So Digital Foundation would have been in the business of doing grants at the community level. And what we have found is social enterprises are born out of a need to kind of fix a social issue within your community. So what you typically find is at-risk youth. You'll see a business that is really geared at assisting the young men in the society. And one of the things that we have said in 2016, we did a grant with Comic Relief, and we made sure out of the 20 grants that we were awarding that 5 of them employed persons with disabilities, because again, we are very deliberate in trying to get the communities to think about the persons that are living beside them, their mother, their brothers, their sisters, whomever it is, as an integral part of the community who has the ability to give back. Yes. So I'm going to tell you some names and you're going to say yes. I'm going to tell you the first one, DEFCAN.
Good morning.
Right. DEFCAN makes amazing coffee.
The best coffee.
The best coffee.
Not up for debate.
Not up for debate. I'm agreeing with you. And
smoothies.
And smoothies, that's true. And they bake as well.
Yes.
They have added baking. So if you look at DEFCAN, DEFCAN was one of the social enterprises that we invested in early on. And they have just taken the model and they have blown it out of the water. And I'm so proud of DEFCAN, and I hope you're listening. As a company, before the pandemic, we brought them in once a month. The foundation would bring them in so they could serve. And that's how you build awareness as well, right? But social enterprises are so important because they will have the time to teach the skills to exactly some of the persons that Marilyn was referencing earlier. Yes. Not everybody would have had the ability to go to university and then the corporate Jamaica could look at them. But also, as a social enterprise, you can teach these skills. Chups, yes. Who makes jewelry, is yes. another one that we would have funded along the way. And what we're saying to organizations, not just big corporates and small SMEs, but to our social enterprises, we are calling on you also to employ persons within your community who you love and who you grew up with and who you want to see excel and give back to society. We're asking you as well to employ them, take the time to train them. Some of them have training programs they've gone through heart. Employ them as well, and they will give back to your community.
I certainly echo your sentiments, and it goes back to the overarching theme, which is together we can be the change. Certainly, a big shout out to Carlisle, to Fabian, to everyone down there at DEFCAN Coffee. My daughter absolutely loves you, and she always goes down and orders her chai latte. She does the cold, I do the hot, and certainly it gives you an opportunity to respect them for their craft. You do not see them as deaf baristas. They are baristas. Correct. Who happen to be deaf. Yes. So we just want to also make it very clear that we do not refer to them either as disabled persons. That's Correct. Not their label. They Correct. Are persons living with a disability. And these are ways that we want to help to educate and for you to also share with your friends and your family and your network. So I want to thank each of the panelists for their insights as we move into the discussion portion of our agenda, which is why I was trying to stop them from talking, because I don't want to interrupt my questions. But before we begin, I want to remind our viewers on Facebook and Instagram that they can submit questions for our panelists in the comment section, and we'll be taking some of those questions a bit later. So jumping into the discussion, I'd like to start with Senator Floyd Morris on the topic of the current Disability Act being tabled in order to learn a bit more about the specific legislation being put forth to create a more inclusive work environment. So, Senator, how will this act move Jamaica forward and help us to achieve this workplace inclusivity that we've been speaking about?
Well, definitely what it is going to do, it's going to require that companies, organizations put in place a number of measures to accommodate individuals with disabilities at the workplace. For example, it will require individuals in the government space to ensure that when they are recruiting individuals, persons with disabilities are given equal consideration in the recruitment process. It will require that individuals in their organization establish disability management processes to ensure that persons with disabilities are taken into consideration from recruitment straight to the point of contractual employment. So, for example, we will have the codes of practice for employment that will come as soon as the new JCPD is established, because the legislation gives authority to the JCPD to establish these codes of practice. And, you know, one of them will be employment codes of practice. And it is going to outline a number of measures that employers must put in place, including having disability sensitivity training, you know. So when I look at all of those things that are to come, I am very excited, because what it is going to do is to open up new frontiers for persons with disabilities in the labor market.
Absolutely. And what will the impact be on workplaces? So we understand that legislation plays this very important role. And so what is the impact on the workplaces if persons even try to come up with excuses or reasons why they can't possibly facilitate something like that? What's the impact?
Well, there are penalties based on the legislation for any violation of the provisions of the Disabilities Act. And so individuals are encouraged to make sure that they are au fait with the provision of the legislation. And I'm certain that companies have their legal team that will be looking at the legislation in depth, you know, so that they are not deemed uncompliant. But I believe that, you know, with public education, because it is going to require a strong public education program to sensitize all and sundry as to what are the provisions in the legislation. And once that they adhere to what is in the legislation, we will have a progressive future. I'm hopeful.
I absolutely agree with you. And quite frankly, we can't speak about being a progressive nation if we're not including every single member of the society and treating that individual with dignity. So the Disability Act is a major step for persons with disabilities, but there's also work to be done at business places. In 2015, Disability Studies Quarterly published an article entitled Accessible and Inclusive City. Can Kingston, Jamaica measure up? Citing that only 9% of respondents with disabilities were employed, and that physical accessibility to office buildings was a major factor. Dr. Christine Hendricks, with the uptick in the new modern buildings, skyscrapers, sky rises, high rises being constructed in the corporate area since that article, one may very well assume that this landscape has changed. Now, in your estimation, have we improved our capacity to serve the physical needs of employees with disabilities? And what more is needed to get Jamaica where it needs to be?
I wish I could speak in the affirmative regarding that question. I know that we are getting better in terms of how we build. What I note, though, as we spoke earlier, that although some persons, they try to build, they end up building slopes rather than ramps. Yes. And it is very, very important to note or pay attention to the specifications, because it is not just any climb. There has to be the climb to the fall.
I can tell you about it.
Right, and so it is important. And it is not only about ramps and rails, of course. When you enter, I spoke earlier to the fact of the width of the door, you know, what the countertops look like. It also speaks to signage, which is very, very critical for persons who are deaf and hard of hearing. It is important where you put the sign, how large the signs are. It is also important to pay attention to where your light switches are, your plugs are, just how the entire space is set out. Because you want, as I spoke earlier about universal design, When you stand or sit, you should be able to reach the light switch just as if I was short, or, regardless of my height, it should be at a place where whether or not I use a wheelchair, I can reach it. It also persons also have to pay attention to, of course, we have high rises, and I know that many persons are building, well, if you have high rises, then you have to have elevators. So the elevators need to be able to voice. They also need to have visual signs so that persons who are deaf or who are blind are able to utilize the elevator. I know that there are usually stairs. The exit and the entrance are very, very critical in any building, just to ensure that I know that usually the exits to the back of the building, especially for high rises, they are usually extremely steep stairs coming around the back, and so consideration has to be made not only for fires and whatever else may happen on the inside, but disasters, earthquakes, anything can happen. And so we need to consider when we're building how it is that we're constructing. As I said earlier, universal design is not just for persons with disabilities. It suits from the cradle to the grave, from the child, the pregnant mother, the teenager on skates. It suits persons who are carrying heavy load, just wanting to move around. And so we have to consider the sidewalks coming in. What does a space look like? We have to consider all of those things. And so there is a checklist, an accessibility checklist that the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities spoke with the Bureau of Standards to do some work on, contrasting it with the building code to see if the building code is really living up to the standard of enabling full accessibility. And what we found was that there's some work to be done where the building codes are concerned to ensure that persons with disabilities, and as I said, the entire society is considered when we think of full accessibility.
Absolutely. As I heard you speaking, what I also thought about is the fact that some of these parking lots have these fancy material. It's very cute and it's very, very aesthetic, but with somebody with a wheelchair, they get stuck in these grooves.
Difficult to maneuver,
so it's very
or
cool.
with a walker or
with
crutch.
A walker, right. So it's very cute in this layout plan, but when you think about the practicality, it just does not make any sense. Something else, as you spoke about the exit, I thought about service areas and delivery areas that seem to be more provided for than actual persons who require the space. Delivery services have bigger spaces and everything has been thought out. It's really interesting where our priorities are.
And just one more thing, the tile. Many times we don't think about the tile. We like when it's shiny and it's new, but think about it. Someone can slip. And not only is it dangerous to the person who's using a crutch, who is using a walker, it's dangerous to the lady in her high heels. And so you can actually create a disability by having those tiles that allow for slippage. And so it is critical to have anti-slip tiles in your space.
Good point to note. And even though we're speaking about, these buildings that are going up, I think we also need to speak about schools. And the fact that my daughter asked the other day, she asked, why is it that she doesn't see students who have wheelchairs at her school? Which is a very good question, because we know that we have brilliant and blind, we have deaf and dexterous, we know that we have persons who are wheelchair reliant, but they have winning personalities, attitudes, and they have their smarts. So the question is, are the schools themselves, if we're going to think about making this holistic, it can't just be about the institutions, but it has to start from schools where my daughter and students like my daughter are interacting with people and other children with disabilities at the same school, so that it is understood that they are inclusive education. But I'm not going to get into it because I'm taking it down. I told you that this topic is extremely near and dear to my heart. Now, while the investment in building more accessible offices may be a long-term goal, there's no shortage of short-term solutions being offered by technology providers in this digital age. Kimberly Sherlock Marriott Blake, there's a lot of technology that has been created, especially for those who are deaf, the deaf community. Can you tell us some of the technological considerations that employers looking to hire persons with disabilities can look at in the short term to begin?
Okay, so the first thing that comes to mind, you know, Senator Morris made a point about hiring practices. So point number one, please stop calling people to invite them to an interview as your only mode of communicating that you have been invited to an interview. Okay. That's a critical one that oftentimes gets overlooked. You just pretend like, oh, well, I've called and they didn't answer. But if you are saying you are inclusive in your hiring practices, then it means that you've maybe sent an email and maybe the email was not responded to, and you've chosen to make a telephone call. Or you're doing both, just as a norm practice for your organization. It also requires that from the moment you are engaging someone, you are not going to ask the question, when someone says, you know, I will require an interpreter for this interview, your response is not, okay, well, will you get one? When someone expresses that, could you confirm for me if this interview will be on the ground floor? Your response is not, oh, no, it wouldn't be. Is that a problem? And the is not a problem is given with a little bit of attitude, like, you don't even have the work yet, and you're already giving us work to do. It's a matter of how you engage with someone at a very basic, very initial point of contact. And that does not require technology. That's probably the disability training and just a little bit of manners. It doesn't require, that part doesn't require technology. Now when you begin to look at someone wants to apply for a job, how accessible, you've decided you're going through a portal for employment applications. How accessible is that portal? Is it something that can be adjusted for low vision? Is it something that can be adjusted for someone who is a page overwhelming with a lot of different ads and things happening at the same time? Does it become distracting for someone who may have an intellectual disability? Correct. Is the system user-friendly for just any of us? You know, that's a simple testing that can be done. Basically ask your staff, hey, could you guys just use this system and tell me how you feel, what happens? Then when we look at someone coming through the door, will I have a very dark tint that I have to be trying to figure out, is someone on the other side? Or is there a light and sound alarm that lets me know that when I've pressed this button, is there something that gives me direction to say the buzzer is to the left? Is there a sensor that when someone who is blind walks up, they say, on the left is your buzzer? Because someone who is blind who steps up to a door without assistance is not going to know the buzzer is to the left. Correct. And when you press that buzzer, is there a response that says 1 minute, or do you just stand there kind of waiting, pushing at the door 6 times, hoping that someone's on the other side?
The things we take for granted.
It's little things. And as you know, as Dr. Hendricks mentioned, it's not just for the person with the disability, because it could be a client. Yeah. We oftentimes think of persons with disabilities as children. We may not remember that the person with the disability may be a mommy or a daddy who is coming to the doctor's office, who is trying to engage at the pharmacy. It's little things that as an organization, as a workplace, you can put in place to make it accessible for employees as well as for clients.
Are there any buildings now or are there any working examples? I mean, I know that we may not have any examples where all of those things that you're suggesting is in place or implemented, but do we have any winning examples where we can say, close to code, they have a very nice, besides, I guess, Senator Morris' house, I don't know. But, you know.
A good alternative, I'll be honest, is in some places I've seen where, at Digital, for example, it's glass. And so someone who, on the inside can see that someone on the outside is coming with a cane. Correct. They can come out and provide some assistance. Someone who is deaf can see there is no one at the door. So, you know, it's not unrealistic to say that there may be some spaces that are more accessible for one disability than another. We recognize that as a country, because we're not quite there yet, you may have a space that's definitely more deaf-friendly than it is physically friendly, or it's friendly for someone who is visually impaired or blind. But I do see where we have agencies that have made a significant effort. The frost on the glass is cute. It's not functional. It's help when you're trying to not make everybody can sit directly inside your little cashier cage.
But
yeah, I don't know if someone is back there, and it has someone else standing there, you know, just kind of waiting, unsure, unaware. But a light and sound alarm, you know, we mentioned security, and that's a major one, because if as a company you are not prepared to, I mean, an earthquake can happen at any time. While we know with hurricanes, earthquakes, fires, those are things that can happen at any time. And I would say, as a starting point, think about your hiring practices.
Yes.
And think about that emergency plan.
Yes.
In the event that someone is in your building when a fire breaks out, what happens?
Correct.
Who is there to ensure that a client who is there or a staff member is there is going to get out of this building, and you will not have an unfortunate situation?
Correct.
And when you start to go through that plan, you'll begin to see what Dr. Hendricks mentioned about the very the roller coaster styled ramp that you have in the back, or you know, the inaccessible doorways that make. And once you look at your plan and you see what you already have in place, then you can start to look at how could we make this more accessible, and that's when you begin implementing those accessibility, that assistive technology, to make the process just work so much smoother.
I appreciate that, and hopefully corporate, you know, private, public, whoever will also invite members, you know, citizens, fellow Jamaicans who are living with disabilities, invite them into focus groups. When you're doing your marketing, your advertising, and all of these different things, you guys bring every part of the demographic into your focus groups, but somehow persons with disabilities are never brought to the table.
Yeah.
Their voices are never heard. So then how do you make the necessary changes if you're not actually hearing from the persons who have these special needs? Yeah. Gosh, I don't know why we only have an hour, you know. So of course, while the government of Jamaica can put in legislation and corporate Jamaica can make the workplace more accessible, there's another major factor to consider at the workplaces. Let's talk about the staff. Marilyn Mccoy, Jamaica has a history of stigmatizing and alienating persons with disabilities. For example, you know, they call members of our deaf community dumb. I've seen it. They've mocked, they use all sorts of derogatory terms, and I go to work on social media when I see it. So what are some of the practical steps a company can take to ensure that its employees are accepting of those with disabilities? That's a toughie.
You know, that question, it has so many answers associated to it. But I'll begin by saying that employment is supposed to be accessible and accommodating. And when it comes to persons with intellectual disabilities, there's definitely no shortcut with that particular fact. Now, the best way to address stigma and any kind of discrimination is through education, right? There is no two-way about it. When we talk a lot about inclusivity of workplaces, but hiring somebody with a disability is really just contributing to diversity. Inclusivity comes about when the necessary changes are made, not just to the physical space, not just to the support strategies, but to workplace culture, right? And we have to face that reality that people will discriminate against someone with intellectual disability, but we have to put in place the necessary measures to educate our employees, right? Sensitivity training is important. When you have an employee with a disability in your organization, you have to ensure that they are educated. Educated about the disability itself, educated about interacting with the persons themselves, because when you talk about interaction with persons with intellectual disability, it's what we call, a lot of the persons with intellectual disability do not have physical features that will tell people that this person has a disability. And therefore, because of the challenges they face with understanding, communicating, transferring, problem solving, they will definitely need a system of support to allow them to integrate in that community. What I also think is extremely important is when we talk about education, we're talking about the exposure to the persons themselves. Not just about somebody coming and hosting a training session, but to immerse them into the world of persons with intellectual disability so that they can see them, they can see how they perform, they can understand that they are persons with skills, with desires who want to work.
Dreams. And what if we have a situation, because we understand that this won't happen cold turkey. We understand that the transition in terms of workplace culture doesn't happen overnight. What if with all the legislation, we're doing all the right things, we're putting the infrastructure, we're using the technology, but then you have employees who are just like, but me not accept this, or where I come from, this is what we say, or they're hesitant. Now,
Right.
how does a company deal with that and not run into issues with ministry and all sorts of other agencies?
Okay. I think it's very important for the employer to understand his or her role in creating or putting in place a system of supports as well as reasonable accommodations to promote the success of the person within the environment. Now, the bottom line is that every workplace should have what we call disability-related policies, right? And that will guide the behavior of every single employee in that organization, because they understand that this organization has a no-tolerance approach to bullying or to labeling or to discriminating against another employee. If the employee understands that, then the behavior is likely to change, coupled with the fact that the person will have the person with intellectual disability within the organization. They will understand, but yes, this person can actually do the work. This person just needs a little more support to be good at what he or she does. So I think it all boils down to education and the role of the management of the organization in ensuring that people understand the importance of supports and the importance of ensuring that there are reasonable accommodations for the person with the disability within the organization.
Thank you for that. Charmaine, I'm coming to you. Cosby, is Cosby still with me? Is she still with us? Cosby Cromwell?
Yeah.
Okay,
Hi.
fantastic. I want to bring you in at this point because, I mean, you're speaking about the valuable 500s. You know, you're speaking about these different, this global movement, the leadership, you know, starting at the top, implementing all of these things. You know, is there anything that you want to add, or even based on your experience, has there been anything that you have seen or gaps that you find that we should try to fill?
I mean, it's such a big question. And first of all, the conversation's been so robust in the room today. So thank you for each of your insights. One thing that I would add to your question is that this conversation and this work around disability is big and it's complex, but it's also simple and personal. That disability does live inside the Digicel employee base. Digicel live both from a personal perspective and connected to family members and loved ones. So as you move through your journey, and this is a journey, it's giving yourself credit for all the things that you're already doing and then understand where you can go as well. And I see so many pockets of that moving across our companies. Brilliant work being done around self-ID campaigns and understanding why the data matters. Really important work being led by CEOs who are putting this conversation into the boardroom for the first time. So to answer your question, we're really encouraged at the way the conversation is changing, but it starts with company level actions and personal actions, educating yourself, educating and understanding your place in this. If we think about, and I know there's lots to get to, but if you think about how the conversation has changed over the last year and a half with COVID, mental health and well-being has become personal to all of us. As we've gone through transition, as we've gone through working from home and our world being thrown into the air and landing again in different places. So I hope that we can begin to understand the context of disability and the way we all enter it in a new way.
Thank you so very much. I just thought that it was a great addition. So Charmaine Daniels, you know, the Digicel Foundation has a history of supporting the special needs community with training and employment opportunities. Hey, Janard, what is the role of social enterprises in empowering persons with special needs?
So as we alluded to earlier, it is very critical that at the community level we start this work, right? The acceptance of persons with disabilities and our social enterprises, which are based at the community, at the ground, like we like to say. That's the first place that we want to start. That's not to say that corporate Jamaica doesn't have a huge role, and as you know, Digicel does employ, right now on staff we have 6, and they've been there since I joined, or since we have moved downtown, that we're all in the same building that you're seeing them. And we do not have everything perfect. It is a process for us,
It's an ongoing
and it's an
process.
ongoing process. And one of the things that you know I've challenged my team with, and we talk about all the time, is we are right now, I don't think we're accommodating persons that are blind. But then one of the things we did this year was we took sign language classes.
Yes.
Because I wanted the team, and you know what, the team is fantastic. They went on to get certified, and I still have my exam to do, so I'll just put that out there. But they were so interested in learning these new skills, and these are some of the things that Marilyn was referencing, that how do you change a culture? So when you come into customer care right now, we don't have it there, but our customer care teams need to be trained as well. Our front desk staff need to be trained. Our stores, the staff need to be trained. And how do you bubble that up from a community level all the way up? Because we can't just think corporate, we have to think of the accessibility for them at the store levels as well. And so social enterprises, which is separate from corporate, we like to think, and we like to think there's no responsibility on them, but really there is. And like I said, you would have seen that with DEFCON. You would have seen that Brescia had hired persons with disabilities as well and taught them how to sew. And so these are just some of the organizations that are doing it well. And we encourage, you know, all organizations, small, medium, social enterprises, schools, get on board, because this is coming, and the law was passed. And so you're going to see a lot of acceleration around this. Why do we sit and wait until there's fines in place? We don't need to. These are our brothers and our sisters.
Correct.
And like you know, Jennard is on our team. And I told you when we came in, Jennard is the heart of our team. We all rally around him. And, you know, just to make the plug, you talked about escape, like when you have a disaster. And I was telling, I think it was on one of the interviews last week, I was saying, you know, we wondered, because we are 10 floors. Jennard sits on the 6th. And when we were doing our you know, those little tests that you do, the fire alarm drills. And we're like, okay, how do we get Jennard out to the building? You know, he's just one of some in wheelchair. No, I can get down faster than you can take me down. and so, you know what? That was a teaching moment for us. Because again, we sit and we think that we know and that we can plan for them. But the truth is that they're such a resilient set of people, right? And he actually got himself down before we could have even thought to have gotten him down the stairs. So, you know, I don't want corporate Jamaica to think that this is rocket science and that this is hard. It is not hard. And what it starts with is let's change the culture. Let's have the will.
Beautiful.
And the conversation.
No, absolutely. I said, Jennard, Jennard just wheel past everybody. I love it. And I just want to take the opportunity to acknowledge Tony Aiken, you know.
Yes.
Tony, I just always want to acknowledge her for being the face, really, of the hearing impaired as well as the deaf community, always using her talent and her platform to assist that community. And everywhere I go, anything that I moderate, I always have to take the opportunity to thank her so very much. I've been watching her over there doing all of the movements, and we appreciate you for giving them the opportunity of really understanding and feeling what it is we are speaking about. So as we continue this discussion on workplace inclusivity, we want to take a couple questions from our viewers. And I start with Patrice Dunn on Facebook, who asks, will something be put in place in schools to accommodate children with disabilities who have classes upstairs, which is a question that I asked earlier. Senator, I'll throw it to you, and then maybe I'll throw it to whoever wants to take on that question.
Well, definitely under the new legislative regime, that has to be taken into consideration, and there is going to be the Education Code of Practice, and it speaks to that as well. So definitely schools going to have to make provisions for accommodating wheelchair users. And schools can understand that they don't, I mean, we recognize the financial difficulties but over time they will make the adjustment. But in the interim, they can make the adjustments on the ground floor to make it accessible
Absolutely.
for the student with disabilities. A couple of years ago, about 2018, I'd moved a resolution in the Parliament calling for the Ministry of Labor, Ministry of Education to make schools accessible for children with disabilities. And they have started the process through Labor Day 2018. And I'm not aware as to where they are with the process, but I know they have started. Okay. And we have to just keep on pressing, because we are not going to see the changes instantaneously.
Correct.
But over time, we will see it, and we, as members of the community of persons with disabilities, have to keep advocating, have to keep pushing for these changes to be made.
Absolutely. Anyone wants to add to that, or do I?
I want to say that although we've been talking about the physical and the infrastructural changes, the biggest change that needs to take place is the attitudinal change.
Yes.
Because when you can knock down some steps, widen a door, put in facilities, if the attitude remains, then the challenge will remain. And so it is getting persons to understand that a disability is a minute away from any one of us.
Absolutely.
We live in a society and we walk on a road where anything can happen. You don't even have to be on the road. You could be sitting on your chair and the legs give way. You could be walking in your house and you bump into something, or something accidentally hits you in the eye. A disability is not, it doesn't discriminate. It's not bought at the shop. And so it is something that can happen to anybody at any time. An accident, you don't even have to, you can be parked in your car in a parking lot, and someone comes and hit in the car and damage your spine. Anything can happen at any point in time.
Absolutely.
And so if we understand that, and understand that I am just like a second from a disability, and moreover, a person with a disability is a person.
Yes.
A
At the
person.
core,
Have
absolutely.
heart and lungs and kidney and liver just like me, feelings and everything else, can move around and do. And once persons get the opportunity, to be into the environment, they can adapt and this regardless of the severity of the disability.
Yeah.
And so let us remember that persons with disabilities are just that.
And what you just said reminded me of what Crosby said about keeping it simple and personal. Someone within my Instagram, my IG family, I just kind of reached out and asked, who in my community, living with disabilities, and quite a lot of parents actually responded to my call to action. But there was one particular IG member who just fell in a coma. She just fell, healthy, just fell in a coma. 3 weeks later, she woke up, paraplegic, couldn't talk, couldn't do anything. And now, and she has a 1-year-old, I think. And so now she is learning the process all over again, learning who she is as a person. So she says that person's told her she wants to become a doctor. So now she's trying to get healthy again. So just kind of letting us, to echo the sentiment of Dr. Hendricks, this is not a them problem. This is a all-the-way problem, and it could happen to any one of us at any point in time. And are we being understanding and empathetic about it? And Crosby, let me ask you, are there still opportunities for companies in Jamaica to be to join the valuable 500, this global movement of companies that want to make a difference where people with disabilities are concerned?
There actually is, and I would welcome those conversations. So we announced the 500 companies on May 18th of this year, and quickly realized that we had some brands that we could roll up into their parents, and created some spaces. So I'm happy to share my email address if that's important, talk to anyone who's interested, or even be a connection point to resources. This is why I get up in the morning, to advance disability inclusion, especially from a business standpoint. So we'd be happy to have those conversations.
Oh, that sounds very good. Charmaine, what is Digicel doing in preparation for the Disability Act to make its offices more accessible. You know, you guys have done a very good job. Let me just take the opportunity. I'm sure everyone here agrees in terms of being the example. And sometimes somebody have to shove out, as we'd say in Jamaica, for other persons to come with us. So the Disability Act is coming. Senator Morris spoke about that. So what is Digicel doing to prepare itself and its offices for that act?
So one of the things that I mentioned before was we have identified, so just in looking at it, we have identified our service to the blind as not being where we would like it to be. We have elevators, but they're not audible. So a person that is blind, unless you had someone with you, you would not know what floor to come off on. And so that is something that our facilities team, we are working with facilities on to see how we can fix sign language for our organization, not just the foundation, but for Digicel itself, is a key one for us as well, for them to be able to communicate with that whole community. I mean, they love DEFCAN anyway, so just imagine if you're able to really communicate in a way that DEFCAN is able, and Blake doesn't have to be right there beside you. But I think the biggest thing that we as an organization want to do is what we're doing today, and this was a kickoff for us in labeling the month Special Needs Awareness Month. Now, there is a Special Needs Month, which is December, but we wanted to drive the awareness in the absence of the 5K. And so this was our first step for us in advocating. And we do have the marketing machinery. Thank you, and big up to our marketing team. They have done a wonderful job with this. And we want to leverage them as a foundation and to really just get the word out there and to speak about the issues and what is facing us as we go down the road, and how do we make it a place where everybody feels that they can belong. I wanted to touch on something that Marilyn said earlier. You know, when I look at Digicel, and I don't think we're any different than any other corporate, but everybody in Digicel embraces the persons with special needs that are among us. Like, you don't know that there's a difference with this person or that person. They're one of us, they're staff. And we're very deliberate, and there would be very severe consequences if someone was made to feel that they were discriminated against. And so, you know, it's one of the things that I wanted to say, you know, when they get in that environment, and to corporates out there, once you employ someone with a disability, you realize what is the disability? Because they're able to function, they carry your team, they're right there with you doing everything. When you see Jannard lifting boxes, what it does, it inspires me, because I'm like, I can lift boxes too. How is Jannard lifting boxes and he's in a wheelchair, you know? And so it really edges us on to be a better version of ourselves. And so I'd say, don't be afraid of it. Embrace it, because it's going to make your staff develop, evolve, and it's going to change the culture. And that's what we need to do.
Absolutely. Kimberly, while technology, and we've been speaking about assistive technology, and we're speaking about how technology is accommodating the deaf, you know, talk to me about the need for JSL classes, the need for that for the deaf community as well.
So it's quite, let's call it twofold. The average child who is deaf, whether they are born deaf or become deaf, they are in a hearing family. And so we're talking about a family and a wider community that if there isn't a level of feeling embraced, there is stigma. And so from day one, you have someone who is ostracized. When you think about it, our norm here in Jamaica is being very, we are very family and community oriented. And so if you don't have family members or, you know, wider community who can engage with a child who's deaf, you're looking at a situation where there is significant stigma, significant feelings of being ostracized, and possibly being in a position where trusting other persons is difficult. You know, when there was the question that came in about making our schools inclusive, one of the things that came to mind is we want inclusive schools, but we don't want to lose the value of schools for specific disabilities. Because in the case of many of our children, it is coming to a school for the deaf where the language can be learned, where the history and the culture and just the immersion in the deaf community happens. And that's when you begin to say, so everybody else in my family is hearing, but nothing wrong with me. Because that's an environment where you are who you are. You know, and so learning sign language is important. Being able to, at a minimum, we take manners very serious. You know, you can't walk through a door and tell people morning, right? At a minimum, being able to say good morning. At a minimum, being able to say in 1 minute, just give me 1 minute, soon come back. So someone knows that when you walk out the room, it's not, Lord, that deaf person here, can't deal with this man. Because the body language and just being able to do basic phrases, emergency phrases, understanding that dumb is not a terminology that we use. It's basic sign language at a minimum that will put us in a position where you can feel like I am one of we. And so learning sign language is a good way to get that started.
Yes.
Senator Morris spoke about the disability training, and it's important, knowing that you're not going to say, boy, this blind man, every minute he wants somebody repeat for him. Or just little things that you say, you know, because we know we pick up on body language, you know, we pick it up quick, fast. Being in an environment where you know these folks here cannot keep a conversation for 20 minutes in sign language. But if someone has heard that my mother is not well, they can ask, how your mommy doing?
Correct.
She all right now? You okay? That is that company culture that makes you feel like, yes, all right, I belong here. And so basic knowledge of sign language, very helpful. Basic awareness of disability, very helpful. A basic appreciation for the fact that we are all people. As Dr. Hendricks said, we are all people, that dignity. Knowing that there's a repercussion if you're going to act a fool.
Enforcement.
Enforcing that is critical. But the basic sign language and just that appreciation that this may be someone who is coming from an environment where sign language is not a part of their norm, and just respecting that you are still an individual. Even if I can't communicate with you fully, I respect that you deserve the right to communicate and to engage. And because I know I can't do it, I can give you the basics, and I know I need to get an interpreter to make this just happen.
Absolutely, and I think what I can absolutely, I can speak on behalf of even some of the most amazing members of the deaf community who I've met. They appreciate when we take just 2 minutes to even learn to say good morning or hello, you know, how are you? They appreciate it because it means that you've taken just 2 seconds to know and to learn how they communicate. And that's just a good feeling from one human being to the next. Listen, this is the kind of conversation really that we could really sit down and tease out. But, you know, we just wanted to get the ball rolling. We want to keep the conversation going. And so even though there is the month in December, and yes, Digicel Foundation and Digicel Jamaica is observing special needs awareness in the month of October, what we really want to do is encourage you to think about them 365 days of the entire year. And when you're intentional and deliberate about thinking about persons with disabilities, it becomes like breathing. All of a sudden you start to pick up on things, you change, the people around you change, and you become that agent of change, because together we can be the change. So I want to thank our viewers for submitting their questions. The topic of workplace inclusion is a huge one, and we know we can't cover it all in the time given, but we hope that we sparked some very interesting conversations that our viewers can take back to their own place of employment. What is that, Senator?
No, I wanted to just say something before you close, because, you know, I have to take this opportunity to big up Digicel, and especially Dennis O'Brien, because from Digicel came into Jamaica in the early 2000s. I was Minister of State then in the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, and I will never forget that they stated up front that they were going to include persons with disabilities. And I remember the first person with, I think he had an intellectual disability, a guy by the name of Richard, who was employed to Digicel. And, you know, Dennis O'Brien ensured that persons with disabilities were included at every facet of the organization. And I said, Dennis, wherever you are, big up.
Big up yourself. Well, you know that Senator Morris just jumped ahead, because I was going to say, you know, now we're going to give the panelists an opportunity to share their final thoughts. But you know, Senator Dr. Floyd Morris always have a pulse of what is going on. So he has kicked off the final word, right? We want to keep it nice, brief, and punchy. Crosby Cromwell, final thoughts.
Jamaican by saying big up. I'll just say ditto to big up to Digicel and everything that the company is doing. Dennis O'Brien and his intention around advancing disability is critical to where we're headed in this conversation. Thank you, Digicel, for having me be a part of today, and thank you for being a part of the Valuable 500. This is the beginning of the conversation.
Thank you. We can't wait to have you in Jamaica where we can teach you all the other things that Jamaicans say besides big up, But thank you so very much for that. And continue with the fantastic work that you are currently doing. Dr. Christine Hendricks, final thoughts.
I just want to remind Jamaicans that disability inclusion is not a sprint. It's a marathon. It's a process. And all we have to do is set our minds to be part of the process. And I think everything else will fall into place.
Amen. I hear that. Kimberly Sherlock Marriott Blake, your final thoughts.
Final thought is definitely just approach accessibility and assistive technologies from the thinking that it's not as expensive, it is a worthwhile investment, and it is necessary to ensure that as an organization you can grow to facilitate everyone in our society.
Perfect point. Marilyn Mccoy.
I am truly happy for this opportunity because my final thoughts would be to encourage organizations out there to provide opportunities for persons with not just intellectual disability, but disabilities in general, so that they can participate in employment. There are so many persons out there who are not getting that opportunity. And what I'd also like to say is that organizations such as ours are willing to partner with corporate Jamaica to ensure that guidance is provided to put the necessary accommodations in place, as well as to provide the training and the education of employees and employers. The time is just right. And persons with disabilities want to work.
They're ready.
They need to work, and they just need opportunities to work.
Thank you for that. Finally, Charmaine Daniels.
In closing, I'd just like to do the call to action to say, Jamaica, we can do this. We have done so many things people told us we couldn't do and we were not equipped to do. I'll just remind you, bobsled being the one that comes to mind, even though we have no snow. And I just want to say, together we can be the change that we all need, and we can change our culture, which is the key to inclusivity in our society.
Absolutely. The only thing I will, I'm not supposed to give any final remarks, but one thing I can say is that, we have to be intentional and deliberate about everything. We find the time, we put the attention and the effort into everything else that we deem important and that we deem valuable and that we deem worthy. We cannot do anything else. Doesn't matter how many buildings we build, no matter how we want to be, no matter what. If we do not go down in history as a country and a nation that stands for every single individual who is breathing within it, then we really have not gained anything. There's nothing to celebrate, there's nothing to talk about. And each of us has a responsibility as individuals to ensure that if we see discrimination taking place, I don't care if it's on social media, it's not a joke. We're not going to kiki, we're not going to ka, we're not going to tolerate it. And when we start to create an environment where we show people that that is not what we're about, then we set the stage for everybody else to follow suit. So I thank you again to our amazing panelists, Cosby from the Valuable 500, as well as our viewers, the team at M1 Productions and Main Event, and of course our conference sponsors, Digicel Jamaica and the Digicel Foundation. Anthony Aiken, big up yourself. Remember, together we can be the change for workplace inclusion. You can continue the conversation online when you follow the Digicel Foundation at Digicel FDNJA on all social media platforms. You can also join Digicel in celebrating special needs awareness this October. So go ahead and follow at Digicel Jamaica if you're not already doing so, to win amazing prizes and learn more about how Digicel Jamaica is helping to create a world where no one gets left behind. I'm Dr. Terry Carol Reed, and it was a pleasure serving you in the capacity of host. Take care. Be safe.